Hello, how are you? You are welcome in Watan Al Karama News Service, and we start our top stories for today with current affairs in Libya. Air Force of the Arab Libyan Armed Forces warned of any attempt to break through the territorial waters of the country. Chief of Staff of Air Force Brigadier Tariq Al-Groushi said the Libyan forces will target any naval pieces freely entering the territorial waters without coordination or permission from the General Command of the Armed Forces. Ships patrolling in the Mediterranean have logged more than 2,700 migrants from overcrowded and unsafe boats, and rescue operations were continuing today, said Italy's Coast Guard, which coordinates the operation. A Coast Guard spokesman has said an array of ships from several countries, including those taking part in a European Union mission, went to the aid of the 18 different boats. European Union foreign ministers agreed yesterday to launch a naval operation against gangs smuggling migrants to Europe from Libya, although the mission will be limited to intelligence gathering for now due to lack of UN authority. Concerning world reactions to a migration crisis, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon today called on European parliamentarians to advocate for the protection of migrants' lives. Ban Ki-moon said during Parliamentarian Assembly of European Human Rights Watchdog, the Council of Europe, I expressed concern about the tragic death of migrants. Saving lives must be our top priorities. In that regard, I welcome the commitment and concerned efforts by the European leaders. More and more people are leaving the Middle East and Africa and try to cross Mediterranean to Europe, often on unsafe vessels. About 1,800 migrants have perished in the Mediterranean Sea this year, the UN Refugee Agency said. Some 51,000 have entered Europe by sea, with 30,500 coming via Italy, fleeing war and poverty in Asia, Africa and the Middle East. The European Union agreed at a meeting in Luxembourg on Monday to use submarines, warships, drones and helicopters in an operation to gather intelligence on gangs who smuggle thousands of asylum seekers to Europe from Libya. But the EU would require a UN Security Council resolution and consent from the Libyan Authority to operate in Libyan territorial waters and coastal areas. At least 17 soldiers of Arab Libyan armed forces were martyred and others wounded in violent clashes with terrorist militias in Sabri and Grotha regions north and west of Benghazi. Military sources stressed that the terrorist militias' losses exceeded tens of dead and wounded people in clashes considered as the most serious between the army and terrorist militias in Benghazi. In the meantime, 4 soldiers were killed by a car bomb targeting sites of Arab Libyan armed forces in the western district of Benghazi. A civilian was injured in an attempt to target residential neighborhoods in Benghazi city. In the meantime, a security source stressed that random mortar shells targeting Sidi Hussein and Ras Abaida districts, as well as neighborhoods near Ozu Hotel, resulting in material losses without casualties among civilians. Those random shells came as desperate attempts to terrorist militias remnants in Benghazi to stay in the city and face the army by provoking horror of random bombardment. Still in Libya, a terrorist Daesh group's elements were killed and 18 others injured by force bombing of the terrorist group's main positions in Nufalia town. Fighter jets of Libyan Air Force also bombed the strongholds of terrorist Daesh group in Sabri district in Benghazi, while the terrorist elements launched around the mortar shell on Bab Tobruk area. The interim government announced the allocation of 6,545,000 dinars to Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs in order to cover Ramadan subsidies for the displaced families inside the country. According to the government's decision, the amount allocated for displaced people inside the country is deducted from 2015 fiscal year budget of Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs and in coordination with Ministry of Finance and Planning, according to available liquidity and system regulations. UN Special Envoy to Libya Bernardino Leon visited Misrata city east of the capital Tripoli to discuss latest developments of the political dialogue. Sources in the city noted that Leon expressed his appreciation for efforts exerted by Misrata Municipal Council concerning the truth, reconciliations and dialogue support, as well as its role in resolving the crisis. The sources also stressed that it was agreed during the meeting on excluding characters that have embarrassed the political and military scene. And now, Yemen, Arab coalition forces struck the Ottoman-era Sira Qasr residence Sadd, destroying parts of the ancient structure, a symbol of the southern port city of Aden and latest cultural site in Yemen, to suffer damage in the war. The attack was one of at least 20 airstrikes by the Arab coalition across Yemen on the same day. Separate raids hit Aden's international airport controlled by Houthis. Residents in Hajj province along the Saudi border with Yemen reported 5 air raids on buildings housing Houthi forces and their army allies, who have repeatedly clashed with Saudi Arabia forces in recent weeks. An Arab military coalition has been bombing the Houthis for 3 months to restore the country's government. The Houthis are allied to Yemen's former president Ali Abdullah Saleh, who still has the loyalty of much of the army. They are fighting President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, who is exiled in Riyadh, and southern separatist rival factions and other political groups. And from Iraq, Iraqi forces says they repelled a terrorist Daesh group's attack on the town of Hasaba in Anbar province. A soldier said a number of terrorist Daesh militants were killed in the attack, adding, "We burned their vehicles and military equipment and killed many of them. Their bodies are still in the desert." A military source said today Hasaba remained in government forces' control and was peaceful. Anbar province has been the focus of efforts to slow the advance of terrorist Daesh group in Iraq. Near the city of Haditha, 3 roadside bombs hit an army patrol, killing at least 6 soldiers, a source from the militia known as Sahwa Awakening said. Moreover, police sources said that in the village of Hapria, a suicide bomber in a car attacked an Iraqi army regiment, killing 2 soldiers. Terrorist Daesh militants have blown up 2 ancient shrines in Palmyra, a 2,000-year-old UNESCO World Heritage Site in central Syria. The report was final of any damage being drawn by militants to buildings in Palmyra since they seized control of the city, also known as Tadmar. In May, Syrian forces had bombed the city, and the militants come within it. Since then, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a Britain-based monitoring group, says this week that the militants had planted mines in Palmyra, but that it was not clear whether it was preparing to destroy the site or wanted to deter government forces from advancing towards it. Syrian Antiquities Chief Abdel Ma'moun Abdel Karim said hundreds of statues had been moved from the city to safe locations before the militants who control large swaths of Iraq and Syria took over. And about Iran's nuclear, Iran's parliament passed a bill today banning access for UN inspectors to its military sites and scientists, potentially complicating chances for a nuclear accord with world power as a self-imposed June 30 deadline approaches. Still, television reported that the legislation prohibiting any such access, as well as stipulating that all sanctions be lifted as soon as a nuclear accord takes effect, was approved by a 240 or 245 for lawmakers present today. State TV said the bill allowed the International Atomic Energy Agency solely to inspect the Iran's nuclear installations under its existing safeguards agreements with the IAEA, but it bans any inspections of military security and non-nuclear sites, as well as access to documents and scientists. The bill must still pass through the Guardian Council, and an elected watchdog body close to clerical Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khomeini, who has the final say on all important matters of the state before becoming law. Two major stability blocks to a deal have been disputes over how much transparency Iran should offer to ease suspicions that it has covertly sought to develop nuclear bomb, and the timing and pace of relief from sanctions imposed on Tehran. And now to Pakistan. Extreme heat in Karachi. Pakistan has left more than 400 people dead, although forecasters say rain that cooler temperatures are on the way. Health officials in the city of 20 million say more than 400 people have died from extreme heat over the past few days. Local residents complain with temperatures reaching 44 degrees Celsius, and many say the government is not doing enough to help. They said the heat is unbearable and people, especially the elderly, are dying of intense heat. The residents also stress that the government is not thinking of a solution. Making matters worse, the city has also been hit by severe power cuts. Paramilitaries have set up emergency medical camps in the streets. Forecasters say rain and cooler temperatures are expected within the next few days. My audience, that is a wrap-up of our top stories for today. For much more, you can check our website www.watanalkarama.tv. Thanks for being with us. My greeting, Rانيا البليدي.